Harry Spectrum Voices is sponsored by coldpack.co.uk. If you use the website coldpack.co.uk, either as a practitioner or as an end user, we receive a donation here at Autistic Radio. So thank you to them.
We speak our words, we listen.
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 This is Harry's Facebook for Sunday the 7th of December 2025. This is where we share the posts from the Autistic Radio Facebook page. The first post is from Autism Together, who are a charity organisation. Autism Together is one of the leading providers of autism services and support in the UK, and they've shared the following. December's meeting Together Forum was a special occasion as the group looked back and celebrated a fantastic year. As it was a Christmas special, there were 4 returning guests from 2025 welcomed to the meeting. CEO Richard Whitby, Chair of Trustees Ian Cadman, Graphic Designer Anna Roberts, and Communications Officer Paul Baker. The meeting began with a roundup of everyone the group had met and everything they'd discussed over the past year, read aloud by Claire, Michael and Kenneth. Next, a surprise VIP flew in from the North Pole as Father Christmas himself dropped by with gifts galore for the forum members. There were selection boxes from Autism Together and special gifts from Dunhelm Bromborough customers who had generously joined in with our Gift a Gift campaign this Christmas. Everyone was very happy with their gifts and meeting Santa Claus, so we all sang Jingle Bells. Continuing the festive vibes, Julie and Alison put a lovely buffet of sandwiches, party food and cakes. The meeting was concluded with some ace karaoke. Congratulations to all the forum members for another fabulous year of co-production. Huge thanks to all this year's guests and to everyone for supporting the work of the forum throughout the year. Merry Christmas.
It is a bit of fun, people having a good time, some stories about Father Christmas coming. It would be interesting in future posts if Autism Together might have the people who are enjoying it say what they're enjoying in their own words. I think that might be something that we'd all be interested in.
The next post is from Aurora Consulting, a disability service and business consultant. Aurora is an autistic-owned business offering organisations bespoke training and consulting based in Scotland. And they've shared a quote and also information that will be interesting for discussion. Autism and ADHD are not overdiagnosed, and continues to say that West Streeting's review to examine whether autism, ADHD and mental health is overdiagnosed is unquestionably looking for the wrong thing. This should not be their starting point. Before they even start, they should be ensuring they aren't conflating neurodivergence and poor mental health. While there is a large number of ND folks who experience poor mental health, they are not one and the same thing. Their starting point should be speaking with disabled people's organisations. And by that I mean organisations that are run both by and for disabled people, not large charities which are not run by us. They need to recognise the reasons why there is an increase in demand for ND assessments and explore how to meet that demand in a way which will properly support people before, during and after assessments. They need to examine the factors contributing to the mental health crisis for so many people, and in the case of many ND people, its accessible systems. Going in with the working assumption that things are overdiagnosed is not helpful. We know so much more about neurodivergence now, so of course there is increased demand. There have been many great comparisons running around about not knowing how many stars or galaxies before we had telescopes. This is absolutely the case. More knowledge about what it means to be autistic and or ADHD is inevitably going to lead to more people recognising themselves. We urgently need more neuro-affirming assessment services and post-diagnosis support led by disabled people's organisations. Nothing about us without us. Many of the comments people have left on news articles about this are nothing short of disgusting. Blaming parents, minimising challenges. I am choosing to not engage for my own mental health. Many of them are deliberately provocative, designed to upset people. It's absolutely okay to step away from those kinds of unhelpful conversations. What's people's thoughts on this? This is in relation to the government and benefits.
I think the most important thing that Aurora said there was that it is okay to step away from trolling and internet comments. We don't have to subject ourselves to these things. We can move away from them. Engaging with them has little value. However, if I look at everything else in the post, it's trying to cover quite a lot of ground. And it's true that Aurora Consulting is a autistically led, autistically delivered company with its own training. It is, however, essentially one person. So it's not always easy, if you're avoiding big charity, to choose places to find out the reality of a wide number of autistic people's experience. So whilst I applaud them for putting themselves up as an advocate, I feel that they don't advocate for me.
Yeah, I can understand that. You know, there's this viewpoint, especially if it's one person. And even if it's just not one person, if it's one organisation, one group of people, it's still very limiting. But the thing that frustrates me about the whole thing is they're making out that people are trying to find easy solutions to get support or just to get money, basically. Like, that's certainly how the mainstream media are trying to push it. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a big person that follows mainstream media in the main or a regular basis, but it always ends up hitting you somewhere if you're online somewhere, because there's a discussion on it and there's different views on it, and there's very provocative views, as it said in the post, of talking about the lazy society that we've become and making excuses not to do anything and do things so-called normally. And this review, and I've got to admit, it sounds typical and it sounds obvious it's something we're going to do, considering because of the diagnosis and recognition of autism and ADHD and all the new diverse stuff and the way that society looks upon it, and because money's involved, that they were always going to review it in some way, and it was always going to be some way that was going to be damaging at a human level.
I think we need to look ahead, though, Harry. If there's a review that looks into something that we believe is a kind of false idea, there's a good chance that they're going to come back after the review and realise, hell no, there isn't an overdiagnosis of autism. There's an underdiagnosis of autism. There's a gatekeeping of diagnoses of ADHD. In different parts of our countries here, you have either a 5-year waiting list for an assessment or potentially a 6-month waiting list. In some areas, you can go to a private area. It's a whole mess out there. So essentially, this is going to fix itself. And getting bent out of shape and not looking like the kind of organisations that can have a conversation with doesn't do us any good as a population, as an autistic population. We need less protest, more cooperation, more open conversations on an eye level. If Aurora Consulting is asking for that, I'm absolutely behind them. And I'm behind the concepts. It's the methods that are an issue for me.
Yeah, it'd be good if there's a public forum where the actual numbers, stats and facts are questioned, because they're peddling a lot of, extreme figures and inaccurate figures to a certain extent. But of course, they're playing to a gallery and they're trying to push things. They always put the most outrageous things out first and then wheel back a wee bit to get some kind of even thing. But yeah, there was a Times podcast on YouTube that I was listening to where the head of the ADHD group in England was speaking, and he just came out with all the contrary facts to what's being declared. And, I can't verify much of what he's saying, but it seemed fairly reasonable to me. And he just put it over in a brilliant way. And he is a medical professional, but he's also a person with ADHD. So it was just interesting to hear that alternative point of view being laid out as proficiently as the government lay out theirs.
I think that if you're in an autistically led business that depends on contracts to get your message out and get your work done, you get more with honey than with vinegar. It would be nice to limit some of these posts in their length to very specific targeted ideas. I think that would be more effective in building the long-term viability of an autistic consultancy. What I see at the moment is a lot of protest politics that is wrapped up around people's professionalism that may be doing damage to their own credibility as professionals and autistic professionals.
What this does is starts a conversation. And from the points that I've made already, when something comes out that it just hits you in the heart, it either disgusts you or inspires you. If it's something negative that hits you hard, the first thing you do is you fight back and you come out with noise that's a reaction that you're angry. And it's like, what's going on here? What are they trying to do? Because the way some things are worded, especially if it's shared in the media or it's shared by someone who has a certain view on it, and it's like hard-hitting because that's the way it's meant to be constructed. But what it has done is created a conversation or started a conversation, and then it's time to reflect and look how this can be progressed forward. Hopefully there's an opportunity for that.
Well, look, just before the 444 drop-in today, we were in discussion with a renegade member of one of the big charities, and they were actually coming to us to say that they wanted an open conversation and that they wanted us to remain as an independent and separate organisation because that is where our value is. I was surprised to hear that from a large charity, because normally the idea is that they control everything and they take over the whole thing. But this person early on in the conversation recognises that it's the independence of us and the multiple thoughts that come from a whole group of us that have value.
The next post is from Autism Awareness, which is a health and wellness website page, Health Beauty Community Centre, and they're raising autism awareness, celebrating your diversity and spreading understanding every day. They've shared a diagram called Autism as a Combination of Characteristics by Miss Speechy P. Just going round language differences, which is described as delayed language, loss of words, echolalia, which is repeating others, can label pictures but struggles asking for wants and needs, pronoun errors, decreased use of gestures. The social differences it moves on to, which they say is inconsistent use of contact, may be unclear, difficulty interacting with peers, may be better with familiar adults and people, may prefer to play alone, difficulty participating in conversations. Then they move on to repetitive actions, and they say may prefer doing things the same way or struggle with change, may play the same way, crashing toys, lining up, or lack of pretend play, and they have preferred topics, toys, or interests. And sensory differences. A selective eater may be sensitive to loud sounds or large crowds, may dislike hair washing and cutting, nail trimming, may enjoy crashing into things, squeezing, and hand flapping and jumping.
It sounds a lot like the questions I was asked at my diagnosis. It does seem to be focused on children, but even in that interview, they were talking about me as a child. And we know, and I presume they know, that these are like things they look for, but because each one of us is different, we may not demonstrate these things.
What Robbie says in the text, it says this seems to focus on deficits and the word stereotypes. And that's what it does read out to me, it's a stereotypes. But then again, they need to start somewhere. And it also depends on who is actually giving out the information. Is it a parent with an experience of autistic child or children who's trying to send this information out to help? Is it an autistic professional? Or is it someone who's actually autistic and has that mindset? It just depends who shares the information, but it does seem stereotypical, even though you can see it's trying to be helpful.
It's making me think about an earlier conversation we had in the 444 about health, which I think was the dominant conversation during that hour. And this thing about relating to your health. And of course, the previous post is about, the questioning of overdiagnosis. And so I have to ask, because I ask myself this, how do I relate to my diagnosis? What was that all about? And I think for each of us in our individual ways, it comes to us for different reasons. It's part of a process or a story we're in, where we may have had stress or a mental health issue or a social issue or some lifestyle issue, and it leads us down a path where diagnosis is part of treatment, say, or a relationship with the health services or mental health services. So we're part of this process, a story, and these descriptions, I think, come from professionally created guidance, which helps the professionals diagnose from, say, psychology or psychiatric learning. So it's about that relationship with diagnosis, I think.
When I look at information like this, and I look back or think back about my initial reaction or how I feel about it now, this is a bit negative, why is it this way? But then thinking back to 10, 20 years ago and how I felt my own autism was to me, and at that time it did feel like a deficit. And I would have lauded this information, this is fantastic, this makes sense because of the way I felt at the time. But because I've moved on to a more positive mindset, because I'm been quite successful in life, I've got through life, I feel it's more of identity more than condition. It's a different way of being rather than being ill or disabled. So it's funny how when I read this out and you get time to think about it while we're talking about it, and at first it seems a bit, it's pushing the wrong buttons, but then at one time it would have pushed all the right ones. It just depends who reads it as well as who sets it up and who writes it.
I agree with you, Harry. It's kind of like being heard and seen, but reflecting on what Robbie was saying about the deficits. If you look at something, say like, that fourth one, sensory differences, selective eater. So what is going on there? Have we got to correct someone's eating? Maybe may dislike hair washing. So we've got to make this person like having their hair washed in a certain way. You look at all these things and you think, well, what is being proposed behaviourally? Is it some kind of conversion or some kind of, or I don't know what it's opening up really these days in my mind regarding identity or behaviour.
If it's about diagnosis, then maybe it's just the first things they look for, sort of like what type of sore throat or cough or the type of mucus you have when you are trying to split the difference between different flus and colds and, secondary infections. I presume then once they get past this list, they get into the unique positive characteristics of each one of the autistic people of any age that they know. And I can't stand my hair being washed even now.
That's a thing, though. There often isn't any kind of follow-up, especially for the late diagnosed.
Yes, that's a fact. I'm on a waiting list for one session in a group. I've been on that waiting list for, I don't know, a year and 3/4 or something.
Yeah, Teresa, and look at what happened to you here. You joined the group in your own way, in your own time, and you've taken more and more time to interact with us, and it was immediate, and that's a lot of hours. And in your home country, you're going to get a one session with a simple explanation. And by the time you get there, you will be able to take 10 of your own sessions and explain it to the other people in that room.
What Robbie shares in the text, he says the problem that it starts with is it treats you as broken.
Even just looking at that phrase, difficulty participating in conversations. I mean, what kind of conversations are we talking about here? Normal, everyday conversations that normal people have? Or maybe the difficulty is that conversations are just shit, you know? Like, so, and they hurt to a certain extent. They're a wee bit sore to participate in. So it's just a lifestyle choice there. I'm just thinking about some of these phrases from the point of view of what Robbie was putting in there about, you know, if it treats you as broken, well, then what are we looking for? We're looking to be just seen as not broken, but something else, if seen at all, you know, like different, maybe different in a positive way. Yeah.
Well, I never even wondered whether I had it, even though I was aware of what it was. And just as you said already, some life event happens and it's drawn to your attention, and then you go and you get tested. Even in the testing, which takes a while, it's like a few different sessions. And when the psychologist told me, and I was at a very good large hospital in a specialized large department, when she said, you know, she was saying what all these groups were that I had no idea you could only go once. And she said, and if you were autistic, you would go to this one. And I said, so I guess I can't go to that one. And she looked at me like, gosh. But, you know, she could have been clearer. But anyway, I was sort of shocked. But when I got out of the building, I phoned my daughter, and my children are neurodivergent in different ways. And she just said, ah, that's what it is. Do you feel relieved?
The next post is from Autism Goggles, which is a community and education cause page, a place to learn about what it can mean to be autistic. And it says the following: autism and ADHD are different neurotypes, but when they show up in the same person, they do not simply sit beside each other. They blend into something new. Many people relate to the term AUDHD because the combined traits create a lived experience that does not match autism or ADHD on their own. Communication is one example. Autistic communication is direct and detailed. ADHD communication is fast and spontaneous. Together, they create a style that moves between deep focus and rapid shifts in ideas. Executive functioning also changes. Autism leans on structure. ADHD struggles to maintain structure. When you live with both, you can crave routine and still find it difficult to follow. This creates challenges that do not fit either profile. Sensory and emotional regulation show the same combined pattern. Autistic sensory sensitivities can change with the environment, stress, or overwhelm. ADHD often brings fluctuating sensory seeking and distractibility. Autistic emotions can build slowly and be a challenge to identify. ADHD emotions can shift quickly and hit suddenly. When both are present, regulation becomes more complex and requires different support than either neurotype alone. Here is the question to think about. Is AUDHD a distinct neurotype? Many people would say yes because the blended traits create a different way of thinking, feeling, and moving through the world. Understanding AUDHD from the beginning can help you understand yourself with greater clarity and compassion.
I'd say my thoughts are quite complex about this after hearing that.
I'd say I'm picturing it as some sort of diagram with little dots, almost like a physics chart. You could say that each one of us is different anyway, And then every once in a while, it'll cluster up into something that is whatever. I can't remember, the new thing they're talking about. And maybe those people have slightly more in common. And then I was thinking, what if someone else was ADHD with central auditory processing disorder, and then they're in a little cluster of stars, sort of like constellations or something.
Is it okay to say, I'm just me?
I've got to say, when I was reading this one, it kind of made sense in what it was saying. But then again, as Teresa's already says, and we have all said many times from different posts and subjects, that everybody is different. Every autistic person is different. So there's going to be differences anyway. But I can see where this is coming from, because it says that being autistic and being ADHD is so contradictory to each other. It's like a mixture that doesn't go well, for want of a better description. So they feel there is a need to put it as something separate so that it can be looked upon and understood more thoroughly.
I can see that it would be helpful in terms of a diagnosis, for whatever reason you would want the diagnosis. And also understanding yourself, but probably importantly, if there are services that you could qualify for, or if people have certain expectations of your behavior in situations where you've qualified for some service, and then you don't appear to be behaving like an autistic person. You know what I mean? And then you could set it aside and then imagine yourself as your own unique individual. Like, this is the pain I have to go through to get a diagnosis, or this is the checklist I have on a piece of paper that I put in a drawer, forget about it unless I'm going somewhere for a service.
What they're doing here is they're providing a pattern that some people will find helpful, because the structure and the way of describing it is metaphorical enough for them to have a sense of their own experience. These things are helpful. Having some kind of structure to hang your own experience of complex interrelations is a good thing. And also recognizing that ADHD and autism do occur together in the same person, and it does seem contradictory from the outside very much, as well as from the inside. I think what Robbie has put there is very important. He says, the diagnosis or label is only as good as the other person's understanding of it. So you hand person the label, and then they understand it in their own way, they interpret it in their own way. Ray says, it's like hitting the brakes and the accelerator at the same time. Autism and ADHD working almost opposite each other. I just don't want people to go away with the idea that they have to fit themselves within anybody's framework. Neurotypical frameworks are damaging to us. We generally accept that. But also, imposed frameworks from our own community can be just as damaging. We need to be independent ourselves, autonomous human beings with our own sense of self that is unique.
Well, that was a great discussion tonight. So thanks everyone who's taken part in the discussion, and especially for the people who have shared these posts that have generated these topics and discussions. I look forward to doing the same next week. This is Harry's Facebook for Sunday the 7th of December 2025.
Spectrum Voices Conversation is an Autistic Association production for AutisticRadio.com. If you have something to share with us, if you need a voice, you can make different kinds of programs with us. You can make a 10-minute short, or you can join us for a podcast to talk about a subject that is dear to your heart, or something you think needs a wider audience. We have an open door policy for divergent views. We do not necessarily agree with everything that we share on our Facebook pages or the words expressed in our podcast. There are a lot of different divergent views which we are trying to allow get aired so that people can see things from different people's vantage points. We hope that you will join that conversation. Contact us through any of our links, Facebook, by email, directly to us.